For 6 years, Marcus had been quietly, carefully unfaithful. Not in the sloppy, get caught with lipstick on your collar way. Marcus was smarter than that. He deleted messages. He paid cash. He had a whole separate contact list under fake names. Dave from the gym, Mike Plumbing, and his wife Renata had believed every one of them for longer than either of them would like to admit. She found out the way most people find out, by accident on a Tuesday, when his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while he was in the shower and a name she didn't recognize sent a message she wished she hadn't read. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She sat at the kitchen table with his phone in her hand until he came downstairs in a towel, and she said very calmly, "Who is Isla?" That was the end of the marriage as it had been, and the beginning of something neither of them had a name for yet. They tried counseling. Marcus cried, apologized, meant it in the moment the way people mean things in the moment. He promised it would stop. It didn't stop, or rather, it stopped for exactly 4 months, and then Renata found the second phone. "I'm not built for this," he told her one night, both of them sitting on opposite ends of the couch like strangers at a bus stop. "I've tried. I want just you. I don't know how to explain it in a way that doesn't sound terrible." "Try," Renata said. "I love you," Marcus said. "That's real. But wanting other people, that's real too. And I keep failing at pretending it isn't." Renata was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice didn't shake, which somehow made it worse. "So stop lying to me about it." That was how the idea got its first foothold, not from a book, not from a friend's suggestion, but from Renata's own exhaustion. She was tired of playing detective in her own marriage. She was tired of feeling stupid. If he was going to do this anyway, she reasoned, wouldn't honesty be better than the alternative? At least then she'd know. At least then it wouldn't be a betrayal. It would be a rule. Marcus, to his credit, did not immediately say yes. He said, "Are you sure?" 3 separate times over 2 weeks. And each time Renata said some version of, "I'd rather know than wonder." What she didn't say, what she maybe didn't fully know yet herself, was that "I'd rather know and I'm okay with it" were 2 very different sentences. And she was about to spend the next year discovering exactly how far apart they were. They set rules. No one from their friend group, no one from work. Always use protection. Always tell each other. No exceptions. No secrets. That was the whole point. The thing that was supposed to make it not a betrayal. For Marcus, it was, in his words, a relief. He didn't have to hide anymore. He went on dates, some brief, some that lasted a few weeks, and he came home and told Renata about them with an openness that almost felt like intimacy. For Renata, the arrangement worked differently. She dated too, at first mostly to prove to herself and to him that she could. A few dinners, a man named Colin from her book club who she saw twice and decided wasn't for her. Nothing that stuck, nothing that mattered. Until Julian. Julian worked at the architecture firm 2 floors below Renata's office. They met properly at a building-wide holiday party. The kind of party where everyone stands around a sad little buffet table pretending they're having a good time, and Julian made her laugh so hard at something about the firm's terrible coffee machine that she had to step away to compose herself. "You're allergic to networking," he told her later, refilling her wine. "I can tell. You've got the eyes of someone counting down the minutes." Is it that obvious? Only to someone doing the exact same thing. It started slow. Coffee, because their buildings shared a lobby. Then lunch, because coffee kept running long. Renata told Marcus about it the way she told him about everything. Matter of fact, over dinner, no big deal. "There's this guy at work, Julian. We've been getting lunch." "Cute?" Marcus asked, not looking up from his plate. "Very. Good for you," he said, and meant it because at that point it still felt like one more entry in a system that was working exactly as designed. Marcus didn't think much of it for months. That was, in hindsight, his first mistake. Not because Renata was doing anything wrong, but because he'd stopped watching for the thing he himself had built the rules to survive. The change was subtle enough that Marcus almost didn't catch it. Renata started dressing differently on Thursdays, which was when she and Julian usually got lunch. She started saying "we" about restaurants she'd never taken Marcus to. "There's this ramen place we went to." And catching herself half a second too late. She started coming home from those Thursdays lighter, looser, like someone had let air back into a room that had been sealed shut for years. Marcus noticed the lightness before he understood what it meant. He told himself it was good. He told himself this was the whole point, that Renata deserved to feel that way, that he'd wanted this for her even if he hadn't fully known it. It took him until a Sunday morning in March to actually ask. "You're happy lately," he said, watching her make coffee in the kitchen, humming something under her breath. Like, actually happy, not just fine. Renata paused with the carafe in her hand. "I am." Because of Julian? She could have lied. The old Renata, the one from before the kitchen table, before Who is Isla, might have. But this Renata had spent a year building a marriage on the specific promise that nobody in this house would ever have to guess again. "Yeah," she said. "I think so." Marcus sat down slowly, like his legs had made the decision before his brain caught up. How much because of Julian? And Renata, who had been asking herself the same question for weeks and hadn't let herself land on an answer, finally did, out loud, in her own kitchen, at 8 in the morning. "I think I might be falling for him, Marcus." The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the marriage's 6-year history. "Okay," Marcus said, in the tone of a man reading instructions in a language he didn't speak. "Okay. We said this was allowed. I know what we said. So this is fine. This is the arrangement working." "Is it?" Renata asked, and for the first time in a year, she watched something crack across his face that she recognized immediately, because she'd worn that exact expression herself, at that exact kitchen table, the day she found out about Isla. It was the specific, hollowed-out look of a person realizing the rules they wrote don't protect them from the thing they were actually afraid of. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He lay next to Renata, staring at the ceiling, running the arithmetic over and over. He had built this door because he wanted to walk through it whenever he liked, and it had never once occurred to him that his wife might walk through it and simply not come back the same person. Over the following weeks, the arrangement, once a symbol of honesty, became something closer to torture. Every Thursday lunch felt like a countdown. Marcus found himself doing the thing he'd sworn never to do again, checking her phone, not to catch a lie, but because he was starving for information about a truth she was giving him freely, and it still wasn't enough to stop the fear. "You're allowed to ask me to stop seeing him," Renata said one night, watching him pretend to read the same page of a book for 20 minutes. "Am I? That feels like breaking the rule." The rule was that we tell each other the truth. It was never that we can't have feelings about the truth. Marcus put the book down. "I don't want to be a hypocrite." "You're not being a hypocrite by having a heart, Marcus." He laughed, but it wasn't really a laugh, more like air escaping something that had been under pressure for a long time. "I spent 6 years doing exactly what Julian's doing, and it never once made me feel like this. I don't know if that means I never loved you the way I thought I did, or if it means you're feeling, for the first time, what I felt every single time I found one of those phones," Renata said quietly. That landed harder than anything else either of them had said in a year. Marcus didn't argue. He sat with it. Really sat with it. For the first time, letting himself feel the shape of what he'd put her through instead of narrating around it. And Renata, watching him do that, felt something shift too. Not the end of her feelings for Julian, not yet, but the return of an old, familiar tenderness for the man across from her, the one who was finally understanding what he'd asked of her. She didn't end things with Julian that week. That would have been too clean, too fast, and it wouldn't have been honest, which, after everything, was the one thing they'd both promised to protect. Instead, she told Julian the truth, the same way she'd told Marcus about him. "I think I need to figure out what's actually happening in my marriage before I know what this is," she said, over the last of what would be their last lunch for a while. Julian, to his credit, didn't fight her on it. "For what it's worth," he said, "I think the fact that you're taking it seriously enough to go figure that out says something good about you. I hope it works out, whichever way that ends up meaning." Renata and Marcus spent the next several months doing something they'd never actually done in 6 years of marriage. Talking, without an agenda, without managing each other's feelings, without either of them performing okayness they didn't feel. They went back to counseling, a different therapist this time, one who didn't flinch at the word arrangement and didn't moralize about it either. The problem was never non-monogamy, the therapist told them, in a session neither of them forgot. The problem was that one of you built a structure to solve his fear of getting caught, and the other of you agreed to it to solve her fear of being lied to. Neither of those is the same thing as wanting each other. It took Marcus a long time to say the sentence he finally said months later on an ordinary Tuesday that had nothing dramatic about it at all. I don't want an open anything, he told her. I wanted permission to not have to choose. And I think what I actually need to do is choose you. Every day. On purpose. Not because a rule says I can't do anything else, and because I don't want anything else. Renata studied him for a long moment. You know, that's not a switch you flip. I need to actually believe it, not just hear it. I know, Marcus said. I'm not asking you to believe it today. I'm asking for the chance to earn it. They closed the arrangement, not with a dramatic fight, but with something closer to a quiet decommissioning. An honest conversation where both of them admitted the thing had done exactly what it was built to do. Expose what was actually broken, so they could finally fix the real thing instead of managing around it. It took the better part of a year to rebuild trust that had been worn thin from two directions at once. There were bad weeks. There was a night Renata found herself scrolling back through old messages from Julian, not out of temptation exactly, but out of grief for a version of herself she'd liked being. There was a morning Marcus admitted, unprompted, that he still sometimes caught himself missing the ease of not having to work for anything. But slowly, the marriage that grew back in place of the old one was different, in a way that actually held. Marcus started showing up to the small things, the school pickups, the boring Tuesday dinners, the moments that don't make it into any story because nothing happens in them except two people choosing to stay in the room. On their 7th anniversary, they went back to the same restaurant with the sad little buffet table from the holiday party. Julian's building had since torn it down and replaced it with a co-working space, a detail Renata found darkly funny. And Marcus raised his glass. To honesty, he said. The real kind. Not the kind we built a rule book to survive. Renata clinked her glass against his. To choosing this. On purpose. Every day, he said. Every day, she agreed. And for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, that felt less like a rule and more like the truth.